The lobby of the Onyx Tower was a cathedral of glass and steel, silent as a tomb. That silence was shattered by a 5-year-old boy, his sneakers squeaking on the marble. He was running, sobbing, dodging billion-dollar suits. He slammed straight into the legs of the most dangerous man in Viridian City, a man whose tailored Armani suit cost more than the boy's mother made in a year. Security lunged, but the man held up a single pale hand. He looked down with cold, grey eyes. The boy gasped, tears streaming, and screamed the 5 words that would ignite a war. "They're hurting my mum!" The smell of stale coffee and industrial bleach was the perfume of Amelia Hayes's life. It clung to her uniform, a faded polyester diner outfit, the color of a weak apology. The Silver Spoon Diner was her stage, her sanctuary, and her prison. For 9 hours a day, she navigated a minefield of sticky ketchup bottles, demanding customers, and the greasy leer of her boss, Sal. But it was all worth it. It was worth it for Leo. Leo was 5 years old, a miniature sunbeam with a missing front tooth and a laugh that could, she was convinced, cure diseases. He was currently sitting in the last booth, the one with the cracked vinyl, meticulously coloring a placemat. He was quiet. Always quiet. As if he understood that their small, fragile life required him to take up as little space as possible. Amelia balanced 3 heavy plates on her forearm, the porcelain hot against her skin. "Order up for table 5, Meg," she called, sliding the plates onto the counter before turning to wipe down the espresso machine. "You're a machine, Amelia." Meg, the other waitress, sighed, adjusting her apron. "I don't know how you do it, especially with you know." Amelia knew. She forced a smile. "Coffee keeps the machine running." "Not just Sal," Meg whispered, leaning closer. "Table 7. The guy in the suit. He's been watching you for an hour." Amelia's stomach didn't just drop. It plummeted. She'd felt the eyes on her. It was a heavy, unnerving pressure, entirely different from the usual casual glances. She risked a look. He was alone in the corner booth, the one typically reserved for cops or salesmen closing a deal. This man was neither. He wore a suit that was impossibly black, tailored so perfectly it seemed sculpted rather than sewn. His hair was dark, his face a collection of sharp, handsome angles that looked carved from Arctic ice. He wasn't eating. A cup of black coffee sat untouched, a silent sentinel on his table. His eyes, even from this distance, were a piercing, metallic grey. He wasn't just looking, he was assessing. Amelia's pulse stuttered. He wasn't one of his men. She knew what they looked like. Cheap suits, thick necks, cauliflower ears. This man was different. He was apex predator. He looked like money, old and dangerous. He looked, she realized with a cold shock, like the past she had run from. "He's probably just waiting for someone," Amelia lied, turning back to her work. But the lie was thin, even to her own ears. The bell above the diner door jingled, and this time her blood didn't just run cold, it froze solid. It wasn't the man in the suit. It was worse. Marcus Weasel Thorne slid into the diner, his 2 hulking shadows, known only as Pins and Dougie, filling the doorway behind him. Thorne was a man who looked perpetually damp, with thin, greasy hair and a cheap gold chain tangled in his chest hair. He was the reason she worked doubles. He was the inheritor of her late, worthless husband's gambling debts. "Amelia, my darling," Thorne oozed, sliding onto a stool at the counter. He snapped his fingers. "Coffee, and make it sweet, like you." Amelia's hands trembled. "Marcus, you can't be here. This is my job." "This is my job, sweetheart," he hissed, his smile dropping. "My job is collecting, and you're late. Again. 2 weeks late." "I get paid Friday," she whispered, her eyes darting to Leo. Leo had stopped coloring. His crayon was frozen over the paper, his small face tight with a fear no 5-year-old should know. "Friday?" Thorne scoffed. "The Vig doesn't wait for Friday. The Vig is hungry. The Vig needs to be fed now." He reached across the counter, his fingers surprisingly strong, and clamped onto her wrist. The metal of her watch dug into her skin. "I'm tired of being patient, Amelia. Maybe I need to take something as collateral. Maybe him." Thorne's eyes flicked to Leo. A primal rage, hot and pure, eclipsed Amelia's fear. "You don't!" she snarled, trying to pull her arm back. "You ever look at him?" Thorne's grip tightened. "Or what? You'll spill hot coffee on me. I own you. Your dead husband made sure of that. I need $5,000 by tonight, or I'm taking the kid. Maybe I'll sell him to some people I know. Bet he'd fetch a nice price. Pretty boy like that." Tears of helpless fury sprang to Amelia's eyes. "I don't have it. I told you. Then find it." He shoved her arm back. Hard. Amelia stumbled, catching herself on the counter. "Tonight, 8 o'clock. Your apartment. Don't make me break down the door." Thorne slid off the stool, smoothed his cheap jacket, and tossed a dollar bill on the counter. "For the coffee I never got." He and his goons walked out, the bell jingling with mocking finality. The diner was silent. Meg was staring. Sal was pretending to read the paper. And in the corner booth, the man in the black suit placed a crisp $100 bill on his table. He stood, his 6'3" frame unfolding with a lethal grace. He walked past her, his grey eyes sweeping over her once. They held no pity, no anger, no emotion or awe. He was a void. He paused by Leo's booth. Leo shrank back, but the man merely glanced at the crayon drawing, a wobbly sun and 2 stick figures. Then he was gone. Amelia ran to Leo, gathering him in her arms. "It's okay, baby. It's okay. Mummy's okay." "He hurt you, Mummy," Leo whispered, his small fingers tracing the red mark on her wrist. "He's just a bad man, Leo. A loud, stupid man. We're okay." She clocked out early, claiming Leo was sick. Sal grunted his approval, docking her pay. The walk home to their tiny 3rd-floor apartment on Juniper Street was a blur of panic. $5,000. By 8 o'clock. It was impossible. It was a death sentence. She fumbled with her keys, her hands still shaking. She'd sold her mother's locket. She'd sold her car. She had nothing left. She'd run from one monster 6 years ago, only to be caught in the jaws of a lesser, filthier trap. She locked the 3 deadbolts on her door, her heart hammering. It was 6 p.m. She had 2 hours. "Mummy?" Leo asked, his voice small. Who was the other man? The quiet man. Amelia's breath hitched. She knelt and grabbed Leo's shoulders. "Leo, listen to me. Do you remember the game we play?" "The what-if game?" He nodded solemnly. "What if there's a fire and Mummy can't get to you? I go to the fire escape and yell for Mrs. Petroff. Good. And what if the bad men come back and Mummy tells you to run?" Leo's eyes widened. "Where do I run?" She'd never given him this instruction. She'd prayed she'd never have to. Her mind raced, grasping for an escape that didn't exist. Then an image flashed in her mind. The man in the suit, the cold, empty power, the way Thorne looked like a sewer rat next to him. He was a monster, she was sure of it. But he was a bigger monster. And she knew, suddenly, exactly who he was. She hadn't recognized him at first. He was harder, colder, the last traces of the boy she knew polished away by power. But it was him. The man she'd been watching from afar for 6 years, the man who owned the glittering, black glass skyscraper downtown. "Leo," she said, her voice urgent. "You know the big black building downtown? The one that looks like a giant's crystal? The Onyx Tower, Leo whispered. He'd seen it on a field trip. If I tell you to run, you run there. You run as fast as you can. You don't stop. You get to the front desk, and you ask for one person. You have to remember the name, Leo. It's very important. What name? You ask for Dante. She took a shaky breath. Dante Volkov. You tell him you're Amelia's son. Can you remember that? Dante Volkov. Dante Volkov, Leo repeated. Is he a good man, Mummy? Amelia closed her eyes, a single tear escaping. No, baby, he's not. But he's the only one who can stop the others. A heavy, booming crash echoed through the door, rattling the cheap frame. Knock, knock, knock. Amelia, Thorne's voice, muffled but full of malice. 8 o'clock, time's up. Amelia shoved Leo toward the small kitchenette, toward the flimsy fire escape. Go. Now, Leo. Run. Run to Dante. No, Mummy. I won't leave you. Another crash. This time the wood of the door frame splintered. Leo, go! She shrieked, her voice cracking with terror. It's the game. You have to win the game. Run and don't look back. I love you. She kissed his head, shoved him onto the metal rungs, and slammed the kitchen window shut, just as her apartment door burst open, splintering off its hinges. Marcus Thorne stood in the doorway, his face slick with sweat. Bad move, Amelia. Bad. Bad move. Leo hit the alley pavement with a jolt that rattled his teeth. The fire escape ladder clanged against the brick wall, the sound swallowed by the city's indifferent hum. For one paralyzed second, he stared up at the kitchen window, a small, dark square against the grimy brick. He could hear shouting, a crash. His mother's voice, a short, sharp cry that was cut off. Run, Leo, run and don't look back. His mother's command finally broke the ice in his veins. He scrambled to his feet, his worn-out sneakers slipping on the damp cobblestones. He burst out of the alley onto Juniper Street. The sun was setting, bleeding purple and orange streaks into the smog, and the streetlights flickered to life, casting long, predatory shadows. He was just a small boy, 5 years old and 40 pounds, in a city of 8 million. He ran. He didn't know the exact address of the Onyx Tower. He just knew downtown. He ran toward the place where the buildings grew tallest, a glittering cluster of man-made mountains that scraped the sky. His lungs burned. The air was cold, sharp in his throat. He dodged pedestrians, their faces blurry masks of indifference. A woman carrying shopping bags tutted as he bumped into her. A man on his phone cursed. They're hurting my mum. The thought was a drumbeat, pushing his legs forward. He crossed a street against the light, a horn blaring so loud it felt like a physical blow. A taxi screeched to a halt, the driver's face a mask of rage behind the glass. "Watch it, you little rat!" Leo stumbled, fell to one knee on the asphalt and scraped his palm. The sting was sharp, hot. Tears welled, hot and stinging, but he wiped them away with his dirty sleeve. He couldn't cry. Not yet. Crying was for later. Running was for now. He ran for 12 blocks. 12 blocks of cracked pavement, looming strangers, and the terrifying, echoing sounds of a city that didn't care. He was a mouse in a maze designed by giants. His side ached, a sharp, stabbing pain just below his ribs. He had to stop, leaning against a cold metal lamppost, gasping for breath. Dante Volkov. Dante Volkov. He chanted the name in his head. It was a magic spell, a prayer. He looked up. There it was. He'd been running in the right direction. The Onyx Tower wasn't just a building. It was an event. It rose from the street like a spear of polished obsidian, catching the last light of the sunset and shattering it into 1,000 pieces. It was so tall it seemed to hold the sky up. It looked angry. It looked powerful. The entrance was a gaping mouth of glass and chrome, revolving doors spinning like turbines. Through the glass, he could see a floor of shining black marble, a ceiling that soared 3 stories high, and men in sharp suits who looked just like the quiet, scary man from the diner. This was the place. He took a deep breath, tasting iron and fear, and launched himself toward the doors. He was too small and too fast for the doorman, a broad-shouldered man in a heavy wool coat who was busy opening the door of a black sedan. Leo shot through the revolving door and burst into the lobby. The change was immediate. The noisy, chaotic world of the street vanished, replaced by a vast, echoing silence. The air was different here, cool, clean and smelling faintly of leather and something he couldn't name. Something expensive? A woman at a long white desk looked up, her perfectly painted eyebrows rising in disapproval. "Excuse me? Young man, you can't be in here." 2 security guards in immaculate black suits moved to intercept him. They were huge. "Please," Leo panted, skidding to a stop on the slick marble. "I need Dante. Dante Volkov." The woman's expression shifted from annoyance to alarm. The security guards quickened their pace. "This is a private lobby, son. You need to leave," one of the guards said, his voice not unkind, but firm as steel. He reached for Leo's arm. "No!" Leo shrieked, ducking under the man's grasp. He saw a hallway, a corridor of dark wood and brushed steel, and he ran for it. He burst through a set of double doors and into an even larger space. This room was darker, dominated by a massive, polished table. Several men were seated around it, but they were already standing, their meeting clearly concluded, and one of them was standing at the head of the table. It was him, the quiet man from the diner, the man with the ice-grey eyes. He was putting papers into a leather briefcase, his movements economical and precise. He looked up, his face a mask of cold annoyance, as Leo stumbled into the room. "Anton," the man said, his voice a low, smooth baritone that cut through the silence. "Get this child out of my office." The security guard, Anton, grabbed Leo's shoulder. "I'm sorry, Mr. Volkov. He ran right past me." "No! Let me go!" Leo screamed, kicking and struggling. He was terrified, but his mother's face, pale and scared, flashed in his mind. He had to win the game. He looked at the man his mother had named. "They're hurting my mum," Leo cried, the words tearing from his raw throat. "Please, they're hurting my mum." The man, Dante Volkov, froze. His hand, halfway to closing his briefcase, stopped. He didn't move. He just watched Leo, his head tilted slightly, like a hawk spotting its prey. "Please!" Leo sobbed, his small body shaking. "You're Dante! My mum said you could help. She said to find you." The room was so quiet, Leo could hear the blood pounding in his own ears. The other men in suits looked at Dante, their expressions carefully blank, waiting for his cue. Dante Volkov took a slow, deliberate step forward. He crouched down, not in a kind, friendly way, but in a way that brought him level with Leo, his expensive suit jacket pulling tight across his broad shoulders. He was eye to eye with the boy. His grey eyes were like twin chips of granite. "Who?" he said, his voice barely a whisper, but louder than any shout. "Is your mother?" "Amelia!" Leo gasped, tears and snot running down his face. "Amelia Hayes, at the apartment on Juniper Street. Please, they're bad men. They broke the door. They're hurting her." The name hit Dante Volkov like a physical blow. The Arctic mask didn't just crack, it shattered. For one fleeting, infinitesimal second, something wild and agonizing flashed in his eyes, a firestorm of disbelief, rage, and a pain so deep it was ancient. Amelia, a name he hadn't allowed himself to think, let alone speak, in 6 years. A ghost, a wound that had never closed, only scarred over with ice. He looked at Leo, really looked at him, as if seeing him for the first time. He wasn't just seeing a crying child, he was seeing the shape of the boy's face, the stubborn set of his jaw, the way his dark, unruly hair fell over his forehead, and his eyes. Dante felt the floor drop out from under him. He was staring into a mirror. He was staring at his own eyes. The shocking thing wasn't that he believed the boy. The shocking thing was the sudden, brutal certainty that consumed him. This was his son. The men in the room watched, stunned into silence, as their boss, the phantom of Viridian City, the man who hadn't shown a flicker of emotion since his father's funeral, went utterly pale. Dante Volkov stood up. His movement was no longer graceful, it was violent, a coiled spring released. He turned to the man standing beside him, a slim, sharp man in a waistcoat. "Julian," Dante snapped, his voice a low, terrifying growl. "Boss, get the car, now." "Sir, you're meeting with the senators." "I said now, Julian. Get the car. Bring the team. Code Red. Full tactical." Code Red? Julian's eyes widened. Code Red was for war. Dante ignored him. He ignored the senator's representatives, who were backing slowly out of the room. He stripped off his suit jacket, tossing it onto the billion-dollar table as if it were a rag. He was already rolling up the sleeves of his pristine white shirt, revealing forearms roped with muscle and the dark ink of a Bratva tattoo. He turned back to Leo, who had stopped crying and was just staring, wide-eyed. Without a word, Dante Volkov scooped the 5-year-old boy up in one arm. It was an awkward, unfamiliar movement, but his grip was like a steel vice. Leo, small and trembling, was tucked against a chest that was as hard as armor. "Take a breath, boy," Dante commanded, his voice rough. He was already moving, stalking out of the room, past the stunned receptionists, past the security guards. "You're safe. Now show me where." The ride in the black Escalade was a violation of physics. Julian Calloway drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, weaving through 7 p.m. traffic as if the other cars were merely suggestions. In the back, Dante sat bolt upright, the child, his child, cradled against his side. Leo, overwhelmed by the speed, the silence, and the sheer, terrifying presence of the man beside him, had finally succumbed to a quivering silence. He just pointed. "That way. It's on Juniper." Dante Volkov stared out the window, but he wasn't seeing the blur of city lights. He was seeing a ghost, Amelia Hayes. 6 years ago, she was just Amelia, an art student with paint in her hair and a laugh that defied the grey misery of his world. He was 24, the heir apparent to the Volkov Bratva, already knee-deep in his father's bloody business. She was his one rebellion, his one piece of light. He'd met her in a small, independent coffee shop. He was there to discuss a protection payment. She was there sketching in a notebook, and she'd accidentally spilled her latte on his suede shoes. He'd been ready to freeze her with a look, but she'd just laughed, dropped to her knees, and started scrubbing at his shoe with a napkin, apologizing profusely. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. These look more expensive than my tuition. Please don't have me killed." Her casual, fearless mention of being killed had startled a laugh out of him. A real laugh. Their romance was impossible. A secret lived in stolen afternoons and late-night drives. He was Dante Volkov, the phantom, the man who fixed problems for the city's elite. She was Amelia Hayes, the girl who believed in abstracts, in color, in light. He'd never told her the full truth of what he was, but she knew enough. She knew he was dangerous, and she'd loved him anyway. Then, 6 years ago, she was gone. His father, Dmitry Volkov, had given him the news with cold, clinical precision. "A message from the Scarpellos, Sinok. A car accident. She's gone. This is what happens when you are weak. This is what happens when you have attachments. The Scarpellos, their oldest, bloodiest rival. The grief hadn't come out as tears. It had come out as fire. The Phantom had earned his name in the 6 months that followed. He hadn't just gone to war, he'd conducted a symphony of destruction. He'd dismantled the Scarpello family from the inside out, ending with its boss, Antonio's older brother. He'd taken their territory, their businesses, their power. He did it all in her name. He'd become the undisputed king of Viridian City's underworld, all built on the pyre of his one great love. And it was all a lie. She wasn't dead. She was on Juniper Street, in a cheap apartment, being threatened by some 2-bit loan shark. And she had a son. His son. A son with his eyes. She told me, Leo whispered, pulling Dante from his reverie. The boy's voice was small, muffled against Dante's shirt. Dante looked down. What did she tell you? She told me if the bad men came, I had to run to the Onyx Tower. She said, ask for Dante Volkov. He's not a good man, but he can stop them. Dante's chest tightened, a sensation so foreign he almost mistook it for a heart attack. She knew I was alive. She knew where I was, and she never came. The betrayal was a fresh wound, but beneath it was a dawning, terrifying understanding. Why would she hide? Why would she let him believe she was dead? His father. It had to be his father. Dmitri had orchestrated it all, faked her death to sever the attachment, used her murder to aim his son like a loaded gun at his rivals. The car screeched to a halt, throwing them forward against their seatbelts. They were on Juniper Street. It was a run-down block of tenement buildings. A second black SUV, identical to theirs, pulled up behind them. 4 men in dark tactical gear, Dante's personal wraiths, piled out, their movements silent and professional. 3rd floor, Leo whispered, pointing. Apartment 3B. Dante handed Leo to Julian. Stay in the car. Lock the doors. Do not move. Boss, Julian said, his hand on his holstered weapon. Let the team go first. Standard procedure. This is not procedure, Julian. Dante's voice was dead calm. He adjusted the cuffs of his shirt, his grey eyes fixed on the entrance to the building. This is personal. He moved across the pavement, not like a CEO, but like the predator he was. His men fanned out, 2 taking the rear fire escape, 2 flanking him at the front. The lobby smelled of boiled cabbage and mold. He took the stairs 2 at a time. Apartment 3B. The door was a ruin, hanging off one hinge, splintered wood littering the hallway. Dante didn't pause. He kicked what was left of the door, sending it crashing inward. The apartment was tiny, the furniture cheap and overturned. A lamp was shattered. In the center of the small living room, Amelia was tied to a wooden dining chair. Her face was pale, a dark bruise already blooming on her cheekbone. She was alive. She was breathing. Marcus Weasel. Thorne was standing over her, holding a handful of her hair, yanking her head back. You shouldn't have sent the kid, sweetheart. Now the price just went up. Big time. I'm going to... His 2 goons, Pins and Dougie, were ransacking the small bedroom, tossing drawers. Nothing in here, boss. Just kids' toys and clothes. She's holding out, Thorne snarled. He raised his hand to strike her again. I wouldn't, Dante Volkov said. His voice, quiet as it was, filled the room like nerve gas. Thorne froze. He turned, his mouth dropping open. Pins and Dougie emerged from the bedroom, their hands full of Leo's clothes, and stopped dead. They weren't looking at a man in a dress shirt. They were looking at the Phantom. In their world, this was like having the boogeyman materialize in your bedroom. Mr. Volkov, Thorne stammered, his hand immediately releasing Amelia's hair. He raised his palms, a greasy sheen of sweat instantly appearing on his forehead. Mr. Volkov, sir. This is a private matter. A misunderstanding. Just a small debt collection. We were just leaving. Dante took one step into the room. His two wraiths filled the doorway behind him, their weapons visible. "You're right," Dante said, his voice dangerously soft. "This is a private matter. She owes you money." Amelia was staring at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror, disbelief, and something he couldn't name. "Dante," she breathed. It was half a prayer, half a curse. "How much?" Dante asked Thorn. Thorn blinked. "What? The debt? How?" "Much. 5,000, sir. Plus interest. Let's call it 10. 10,000 for the trouble." Dante reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and tapped the screen. "Julian, transfer $20,000 to an account for a Mr. Marcus Thorn. He'll provide the details." He looked up at Thorn, whose eyes were wide with greed and confusion. "The debt is paid. Double. Now it's my debt. She owes me." Thorn's smile was weak. "Of course, Mr. Volkov. Whatever you say. We'll just be on our—" "You put your hands on her," Dante stated. It wasn't a question. He pointed at the bruise on her cheek. "You did that." "It was a mistake," Thorn stammered, backing away. "She was resisting—" "And you," Dante said, his gaze shifting to Pins, who was still holding Leo's pajamas. "You touched the boy's things." Dante nodded to his men. It was fast. It was brutal. It was silent. The wraiths moved in. There were no gunshots. That was too loud, too messy. Just the sound of a taser, the dull, wet thud of a specialized baton hitting a knee, a choked-off cry. In less than 10 seconds, Pins and Dougie were on the floor, neutralized, groaning, and zip-tied. Thorn was hyperventilating, his back pressed against the wall. "Please, I didn't know. I didn't know she was yours." "She's not," Dante said, stopping directly in front of him. "She's herself. And you made a catastrophic error in judgment." This was the moment of shocking action. Thorn squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the bullet. But it didn't come. "You're not going to die, Weasel," Dante said, his voice a cold caress. Thorn opened his eyes, hope dawning. "Death is a gift. It's an ending." "You don't get an ending." Dante leaned in, his grey eyes boring into Thorn's. "You work for me now. That 20,000, that's your signing bonus, and you're going to pay it back to me at an interest rate that I determine. You're going to be my rat in the sewer you crawled out of. You will report to Julian. You will do exactly as I say. And if you ever look at a woman or a child with anything but respect, again I will personally dismantle you, piece by piece, starting with your fingernails. Do you understand me?" Thorn, shaking so hard he could barely stand, nodded frantically. Yes, Mr. Volkov. Anything. Thank you." "Get him out of my sight," Dante ordered his men. The wraiths hauled all 3 men, Thorn stumbling, his goons groaning, out of the apartment. The room fell silent. It was just Dante and Amelia. He turned to her, the fury draining away, replaced by an abyss of 6 lost years. He walked over, and, with steady hands, began to work on the ropes binding her wrists. His fingers, which had just ordered a man into servitude, were surprisingly gentle. The rope fell away. She rubbed her chafed skin, her eyes never leaving his face. "Dante," she whispered again. He finished with the ropes on her ankles and stood back. He looked at her, at the cheap apartment, at the overturned, broken life she had. "You were dead," he said, his voice flat, hollow. "I know," she whispered, tears finally tracing paths through the grime on her face. "You've been here, all this time. You let me believe I had to," she choked out, "to protect him. To protect him? From me?" The accusation was sharp as glass. "No," she said, her voice rising. "From him. From your father." Dante froze. "He found me, Dante," she said, her body trembling. "6 years ago. He knew I was pregnant. He gave me a choice. Disappear, and he'd let my baby live. Or stay, and he'd let the Scarpellos kill us both, and then you. He said I was your weakness. He said he was saving you." The air left Dante's lungs. It all clicked into place. The fake accident. The message from the Scarpellos. His father had orchestrated it all. He'd used his own son's grief as a whetstone to sharpen him into a weapon. "He faked my death to protect me," Amelia cried, "and to make you the monster he always wanted you to be." Dante stared at her. The woman he had mourned, the woman he had avenged, the mother of his son. He reached out, his hand hesitating, and his fingers brushed the bruise on her cheek. His touch was feather-light, a stark contrast to the violence of moments before. She flinched, then leaned into his touch. "He's safe," Dante said, his voice thick. "The boy. Leo. He's in the car. He has my eyes." "I know," Amelia sobbed, and she finally broke, collapsing forward. Dante caught her. He, who hadn't held another person in genuine, non-violent contact in years, pulled her against his chest. He held Amelia Hayes as their apartment building, their old life, and the lies that had separated them crumbled around them. "You're not safe here," he said, his voice a rumble against her hair. "You're coming with me. Both of you." "Dante, you can't. Your world, it's not for him. It's not for Leo." He pulled back just enough to look her in the eyes, his own gaze burning with a new, terrifying in its intensity possession. "My world is the only place you are safe," he stated. "You ran from me once to protect him. I understand. But you are never running again. You're home. You and my son are coming home." The drive to the Onyx Tower was a study in stunned silence. Julian drove, his eyes occasionally flicking to the rearview mirror, his expression a mask of professional neutrality that barely concealed his shock. In the back, Dante sat on one side, Amelia on the other, and Leo was nestled between them. The boy had launched himself into his mother's arms the second she'd emerged from the building, and now, exhausted and overwhelmed, he had fallen into a deep, twitching sleep, his head resting in Amelia's lap. Amelia's hand never stopped stroking his hair. She was staring at Dante. He wasn't the 24-year-old she had loved. That boy was gone. This man was harder, colder, more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The suit he'd thrown on in the car was worth more than her diner salary for an entire year. The power didn't just radiate from him, it choked the air. Dante, in turn, was staring at the boy. His son. Leo. The name felt foreign on his tongue. He had a son, a living, breathing piece of himself, and a living, breathing piece of her. The rage he felt toward his deceased father was a cold, black singularity, threatening to swallow him whole. His father, Dmitri Volkov, had not only stolen 6 years of his life with Amelia, but he had stolen 6 years of his son's. He'd allowed his own grandson to live in poverty, to be threatened by filth like Marcus Thorne. The lie was so profound, so complete, that it rearranged Dante's entire past. His grief, his bloody vengeance, his rise to power. It was all a puppet show, and his father had been holding the strings. The Escalade slipped into a private underground garage beneath the Onyx Tower. The elevator required Dante's thumbprint. It opened not into a lobby, but directly into the penthouse. The doors slid open, and Amelia gasped. Her apartment in 3B could have fit into the foyer. The penthouse was a 2-story expanse of glass, black marble, and brushed steel. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Viridian City, spread out below them like a carpet of diamonds. The furniture was minimal, expensive, and looked untouched, as if no one actually lived here. It was a museum of power. "Julian," Dante said as they stepped out, "cancel my schedule for the next 48 hours. All of it. I'm dark." "Sir, the Port Authority Board. Handle it. And Julian, get me everything on Antonio Scarpello, the brother, the one I left alive." Julian's head snapped up. "Boss, the Scarpellos are ghosts. We broke them 6 years ago. Antonio runs a legitimate waste management business. He's clean." "Nobody is clean," Dante said, his voice flat. "My father lied to me. He used the Scarpellos as a bogeyman. I want to know if they were in on it. I want to know if Antonio knew she was alive. I want to know what he ate for breakfast. Dig." "Yes, Mr. Volkov. And Julian," Dante added, as Julian was about to step back into the elevator. "Find Marcus Thorne. I want him managed. He's my asset now. I want a 24/7 tail on him." "Understood." The elevator doors slid shut, leaving the three of them alone in the vast, silent apartment. The silence was deafening. Leo stirred and Dante moved. He needs to sleep in a bed. He led them up a floating glass staircase to the second floor. He bypassed a hallway of empty, sterile guest rooms and pushed open the door to his own. The master bedroom was the size of a tennis court, dominated by a massive bed and another wall of glass. "He can sleep here," Dante said. It wasn't a suggestion. Amelia gently laid Leo down on the impossibly soft sheets. The boy was instantly lost in the expanse of pillows. She pulled a cashmere throw blanket from the foot of the bed and covered him. When she turned, Dante was standing right behind her. She hadn't heard him move. "He's beautiful, Amelia," he said, his voice raw. "He's smart," she whispered, her hands clasped in front of her. "He likes to draw. He's good at math, for a 5-year-old. "Why did you call him Leo?" She looked down. "My grandfather's name was Leon. And you? You always reminded me of a lion. Quiet, but always watching." "Ready?" Dante absorbed that. He walked to the window, his back to her. "You should have come to me. The moment my father died, you should have come." Dmitri Volkov had died of a heart attack 2 years ago, alone in his study. "Come to you?" Her voice rose, laced with an anger that surprised them both. "And say what? Hi, Dante. Remember me? The girlfriend your father supposedly had killed? Well, I'm alive, and by the way, here's your son, who I've been hiding in poverty. I saw the papers, Dante. I saw what you became. The Phantom, the king of the underworld. You think I was going to bring him?" She pointed at the sleeping boy. "Into that? I was safer with the loan sharks." The words hit him hard. He turned. "Safer? You were tied to a chair. He hit you. And what would you have done?" She shot back. "You, the man who just had his men taser and beat 2 people in my living room? What would your rivals do if they knew he existed? He was safe when he was nobody. He's not safe as Dante Volkov's son. My God, Dante, I've just handed my son a death sentence by bringing him here." The panic was setting in, the reality of what she had done. She had run from a small-time monster right into the lion's den. "That," Dante said, stepping toward her, his intensity of physical force, "is where you are wrong. He was never safer. You were just lucky. That luck ran out tonight. Here," he swept his arm, indicating the penthouse. "He is untouchable. I am the king, and no one touches the king's family. I am not your family, Dante. I am the woman you used to know, and he is my son. He is my son." The words hung in the air, heavy and irrefutable. Dante's gaze dropped to her mouth, then back to her eyes. The 6 years melted away. The rage, the fear, the betrayal. It all swirled around them. But underneath it, the one thing that had terrified his father, the one thing that had driven her into hiding, was still there. It was a live wire. "You're right," he said, his voice softening just a fraction. "You're not the woman I used to know. You're stronger. You survived my father. You survived 6 years alone. You raised him. You did it all." He reached out, his hand hovering, not at her bruised cheek this time, but at her hair. He brushed a strand back from her face, his thumb grazing her temple. "I thought you were dead," he whispered. "I buried you. I waged a war for you. And every day for 6 years, I have been empty. A machine. And then your boy. Our boy ran into my office." Amelia's resolve crumbled. The fight drained out of her, replaced by the bone-deep weariness of 1,000 sleepless nights. "I was so scared, Dante. Every day." "You never have to be scared again," he said. He pulled her to him, his arms circling her waist, pulling her flush against his hard body. It was not gentle. It was possessive. It was a brand. "You are mine, Amelia. You have always been mine. My father just delayed things." He kissed her. It wasn't the sweet, questioning kiss of the art student and the Mafia heir. It was a kiss of plunder, of 6 years of rage and grief and loss. It was hunger and possession, and a desperate, drowning relief. It was the phantom claiming his ghost. Amelia's hands, which had come up to push him away, instead fisted in his shirt. She kissed him back with all the terror and fury and desperate longing of her hidden life. She was kissing the man who had just saved her, the man who was now her jailer, the man who was the father of her child. He broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers. His breathing was heavy. "There's a problem," he said, his voice a low growl. "What?" she breathed, her senses full of him. "My father faked your death. He used the Scarpellos as the reason. I retaliated, and I took everything from them. I left Antonio Scarpello alive, let him keep his legitimate business as a final insult. A king letting a pawn live." So, Dante said, his grey eyes turning to ice. "What happens when that pawn, who has been nursing a grudge for 6 years, finds out that the casus belli, the entire reason for his family's destruction, was a lie?" Amelia went cold. He'd see it as an opportunity. He'd see you, and he'd see Leo. Dante's gaze shifted to the sleeping boy. "He doesn't just have a reason for revenge anymore. My father's lie just gave him the perfect weapon." The next morning, Amelia awoke in a guest room of impossible luxury. The sun streamed in, but the silence and the height made it feel like a beautiful prison. She found Leo in the kitchen, sitting at the massive marble island, his feet dangling high above the floor. He was happily chattering about a dream to Dante, who was standing stiffly by the counter, holding a carton of milk. "And the dog was this big," Leo was saying, his mouth full of a sugary cereal Amelia could never afford. Dante was just listening, his expression unreadable, but his focus was entirely on the boy. When Leo saw her, he beamed. "Mommy, Dante has sugar cereal, and the TV is in the wall." Dante turned to her, his face shadowed with a lack of sleep. He was awake. He was hungry. He gestured to the kitchen. "Anything you want, you just ask." "I have to go to my office. Downstairs," Dante said. "Julian will be here. The penthouse is locked down. No one gets in or out without my authorization. You're safe here." "Dante," she stopped him, her voice trembling. "We can't just live here, in your glass tower, like prisoners." "You are not prisoners," he said, his voice sharp. "You are protected. For how long?" Her fear gave way to an anger that surprised them both. "What happens now? You handle Scarpello, you kill him. Is that the world you want Leo to grow up in? Is that all you are?" The words struck him. I read the papers, Dante, she pressed, stepping toward him. You're not just a bratva boss. You're a legitimate billionaire. You own this city. You don't have to rule with a gun. You can rule with a pen. Be smarter. Don't be your father. Dante stared at her, a flicker of surprise in his grey eyes. He was seeing the woman he'd loved, not just the victim he'd rescued. I will consider your tactical advice, he said, and left. The day passed in a blur of surreal luxury. Julian, polite and efficient, had clothes delivered for Amelia and a mountain of toys for Leo. Leo was in heaven, drawing on the floor and driving remote control cars. But Amelia felt the trap. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, a prisoner looking down on her old life. Dante returned that evening. He'd changed his suit. He carried a large, flat box. A gift, he said, handing it to Leo. It was a professional art set, filled with pencils and charcoal. Wow, Leo breathed, like Mummy's. Thank you, Dante. After Leo was settled, Dante led Amelia to his home office. We need to talk. He poured 2 whiskies. Julian did his digging. Antonio Scarpello is exactly what I thought. He's 100% legitimate. His waste management company is clean. So he's not a threat? Amelia asked, hope rising. He's the most dangerous threat, Dante countered. A man who was a monster, pretending to be a saint? He's a bomb, and he's desperate. His company is failing. He's over-leveraged, and he needs to win a new city contract to survive. The deciding vote is Councilman Robert Miller, a man with a significant gambling problem. So you'll buy the councilman, she stated. I'm going to own him, Dante said. But that's not the real plan. He turned his laptop, showing her a grainy surveillance photo. Your friend, Marcus Thorne. Julian's team has been tailing him. Guess who our little weasel met with this afternoon? Amelia looked. Thorne sat at an outdoor cafe. Across from him, looking calm and fatherly, was Antonio Scarpello. Oh my God, she breathed. How? He thinks he's a player, Dante said, his voice pure ice. He's trying to sell the only information he has. He's telling Scarpello that my long-lost love is alive, and she has a son. Dante's investigation revealed a shocking twist. Marcus Thorne was trying to sell Amelia and Leo's existence to Antonio Scarpello. Scarpello was intrigued, but demanded proof. Amelia, refusing to be a victim, proposed a plan. Don't kill Thorne, she insisted. Let's use him. They fed the rat false intel. Dante was making a play for the city contract Scarpello desperately needed to avoid financial ruin. As Scarpello scrambled to counter the imaginary threat, Dante made his real move. Having secretly acquired Scarpello's massive loan, Dante called it in, bankrupting him instantly. Now desperate, Scarpello had one last move: kidnap Leo. Anticipating this, Dante and Amelia set a final trap. They used Thorne to leak a fake, safe house move, luring Scarpello to a deserted Volkov-owned warehouse. Dante and his men lay in wait. When Scarpello and his team stormed in, they were met with blinding floodlights. Realizing he'd been played, Scarpello pulled a gun in a final, suicidal rage. But before he could fire, a shot echoed from the rafters. Dante's sniper didn't miss. The Scarpello threat was over, permanently. Dante returned to the penthouse at 4 a.m. Amelia was waiting in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea. She looked up, her eyes asking the question she couldn't speak. It's finished, he said, his voice raw. Scarpello is gone. And Thorne? She whispered. Anchorage, Alaska, Dante said, a humorless smile touching his lips. I gave him the choice my father gave you. Disappear or be disappeared. He's on a 6 a.m. flight. Exile is a life sentence. It's smarter. He had listened. He hadn't just used violence. He'd used his intellect. Amelia's relief was a tangible thing. She stood and walked to him, resting her head on his chest. His arms, rigid at first, wrapped around her, holding her tight. "I won't let you go again, Amelia," he vowed. "You're not a prisoner. You're my partner. And Leo, he's my heir." The next morning, sunlight filled the kitchen. Leo giggled as Dante, the most feared man in the city, scowled at a blackened, smoking pancake. "You're burning it," Leo cheered. Amelia laughed, taking the spatula from Dante's hand. "Here, let me." Dante Volkov stepped back, watching his family. The shocking thing he'd done wasn't the violence he'd unleashed. It was letting a small boy, and the woman he loved, save him. And that's how a 5-year-old boy's desperate plea didn't just save his mother. It rewrote the entire power structure of Viridian City. Dante Volkov, a man who ruled by fear, was shown a new way to rule, by love. The shocking thing he did wasn't to kill, it was to build. He didn't just gain a son, he regained his own humanity. But the question remains, can a phantom truly live in the light? Or will the darkness he commands always threaten to swallow his new family whole? What did you think of Dante's ultimate decision? Was sending Thorn to Alaska a bigger power move than killing him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of drama, danger, and redemption, please make sure to hit that like button. Share it with a friend who loves a good twist. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more shocking stories just like this one. Don't forget to ring that notification bell.